it's pretty amazing, isn't it? That a tiny baby, just like weeks old, can flash a smile that feels so real, so connected.
Yeah.
Or, flip side, think about how intense they get when you just step out of the room a few months later. That separation anxiety.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so let's get into this, because today on this deep dive, we're really exploring the foundations, social and personality development in infancy.
Right.
We're looking at the research, how babies start feeling and figuring out emotions, how they get that sense of me, those first big attachments, and just how they start making sense of the social world.
And it's fascinating because we're really talking about the absolute beginnings of our soul and emotional selves. The research we're digging into, it paints a really comprehensive picture of this stage.
Yeah.
And our goal here is to pull out those key insights, the things that really shed light on how these, fundamental parts of us start to emerge.
Exactly. So if you're a parent, or maybe expecting, or honestly, even if you're just curious about what makes people tick, this is definitely for you. We're going to try and cut through the jargon, deliver some clear info, and hopefully find some surprises too.
Sounds good.
So where do we start? How do we even begin to grasp an infant's social and emotional world?
Well, emotions seem like the natural place, right? The research shows babies display a, surprisingly wide range of emotions really early on.
Like what kind of range?
Interest, distress, disgust. Pretty basic stuff at first, but it grows. And what's really striking is that these core facial expressions, they seem to be universal, same across different cultures.
Wow. So a baby in, say, Japan and a baby in Canada might show they're unhappy in a very similar way?
Pretty much, yeah. But there's a little nuance there. The research also points out that especially in those first few weeks, what you see on their face might not perfectly match what they're feeling inside.
Okay, so it's not always a direct window.
Not perfectly, not right away. I mean, those expressions look like adult emotions, but the baby's actual inner experience could be different, simpler perhaps. But, and this is important, as they develop, those expressions do increasingly reflect genuine emotional states.
All right.
It's not just random muscle twitches. They seem to have this innate set of emotional expressions wired in. And how these develop is definitely tied to how their brain is maturing.
Okay, and that brings us to smiling. That first social smile, parents live for that moment.
Oh, absolutely. It's a huge milestone.
And the research, it highlights how these smiles change.
Yeah.
Right? They become more directed, aimed at people.
Exactly. And by about 18 months, get this, they actually smile more frequently at people than they do at, say, a toy or an object.
That really shows that growing social connection.
It does. And maybe we should clarify what we mean by a social smile. It's specifically a smile in response to another person. It's interaction. And interestingly, the research we looked at suggests infants can actually pick up on emotional tone in voices before they can fully decode facial expressions.
Really? So they're hearing the emotion first. That's fascinating. Like they're tuning into our vocal channel before the visual one, in a way.
Seems like it. And then around 4 months or so, they start connecting the dots, linking those voice tones with the facial expressions. That's when they begin to grasp the emotional meaning behind it all.
Wow, so it's a really rapid learning curve. Expressing emotions, figuring out emotions.
Definitely, both sides of the coin.
Okay, so they're feeling things, decoding things. What about understanding themselves, that sense of me? When does that start?
Self-awareness, yeah. That idea of being a separate person, it usually starts to emerge around the 1-year mark, maybe a little later for some.
And how do researchers even test that?
Well, the classic method is the mirror and rouge test. You put a little spot of color, like lipstick rouge, on a baby's nose without them noticing. Then you put them in front of a mirror. If they touch their own nose when they see the reflection, it suggests they recognize the reflection as themselves.
I see. Not touching the mirror, but their actual nose.
Exactly. And then a bit later, maybe between, say, 17 and 24 months, you start seeing them show awareness of their own abilities, like what they can do.
I can do it, face.
Yes.
Or maybe I can't do it yet, face.
Right. And the research also brings up an important point. Culture matters here. How we come to see ourselves isn't just this isolated individual thing. It's shaped by our upbringing, too.
That makes sense. Our environment influences how we understand our place.
Absolutely. And on a related but, slightly different track, the research highlights something pretty interesting, maybe even a bit unsettling at first glance, about infants and race.
Okay.
It seems babies as young as 6 months old can actually notice racial differences.
6 months, wow.
Yeah. And further research shows that by around age 3, if you show kids photos and ask them to point to potential friends, They often show a preference for peers of their own race.
That is notable, and I guess it really underscores why it's so important to talk openly with kids about diversity, in ways they can understand, and really encourage those positive interactions across different groups.
Exactly. It's not about saying a 3-year-old is biased in the adult sense, but recognizing that this awareness of difference pops up early and we need to guide it constructively.
Right. It highlights that social learning is happening from day one, basically.
It really does. And building on that social understanding, another key thing kicks in around 8 or 9 months. Social referencing.
Social referencing. What is that exactly? Is that when they look at you to see how you're reacting?
Precisely. They intentionally start looking to others, usually mom or dad, to get clues about how to feel or act when things are uncertain.
Like, is this new toy scary or fun? Which at mom's face.
Exactly that. They're reading your expression, your tone of voice, to figure out if something's okay or maybe dangerous. There's this research method called the still face technique.
I think I've heard of it.
Yeah, where a caregiver interacts normally and then suddenly goes completely blank, unresponsive. It really shows how much babies rely on those back and forth social cues. They get quite distressed when the cues stop.
Wow. So they're actively seeking that information. How should I feel about this? It's a huge step in navigating the world.
A crucial step.
Okay, let's shift gears a bit. Theory of mind. Sounds kind of complex. What's the core idea there?
At its heart, theory of mind is basically understanding that other people have minds too, with their own thoughts, feelings, beliefs, intentions, and that these mental states drive their behavior. And we see the early roots of this even in infancy. They start seeing other people as compliant agents, meaning they get that others can act on their own and respond to requests. They grasp that others are like them in a way with their own inner world.
So it's not just seeing mom as someone who brings food, but as someone who decides to bring food, who has intentions.
Kind of, yeah. It's the beginning of that understanding, and this ties directly into empathy.
Right, feeling with someone else.
Exactly. Empathy, that ability to share or understand another's feelings, it develops gradually. But by around age 2, you often see toddlers showing comforting behaviors. Like, if another child is crying, they might try to pat them or offer a toy.
Oh, that's sweet. And also maybe a bit clumsy sometimes.
Oh, definitely. But the intention is there. And here's a fascinating twist. Around that same age, 2 years old, they also develop the capacity for deception.
Whoa, really? Lying it too?
Well, maybe simple deception, like hiding something and pretending they don't know where it is. It actually suggests they're starting to get that other people can hold false beliefs that what's in someone else's head might be different from reality or from what they know.
That's actually a pretty sophisticated cognitive leap, even if it's used to, sneak an extra cookie.
It really is. It shows a developing understanding of other minds.
Our source also mentioned something called the video deficit. What's that about?
Ah, yes. The video deficit refers to the finding that generally, kids under 3 learn less effectively from watching a screen compared to live, face-to-face interaction.
Okay, so screen time isn't ideal for learning for the really little ones.
Well, it depends. A key factor seems to be what researchers call social contingency. That's the back and forth, the responsiveness you get in a real conversation.
Like when you talk, I respond, you react to my response.
Yeah.
That kind of flow.
Exactly. Live interaction is full of it. Pre-recorded video lacks it. But interestingly, video chat like FaceTime or Skype can be beneficial if it allows for that contingency. If the person on screen is reacting and responding directly to the child in real time.
That makes total sense. It's the interaction that matters most.
Seems to be the key for that age group, yeah.
Now, as babies get more socially tuned in, we often see stranger anxiety and separation anxiety kick in. You mentioned separation anxiety earlier. Are these like normal phases?
Oh, absolutely. Stranger anxiety, that caution or fear around unfamiliar people, and separation anxiety, the distress when a main caregiver leaves, they're usually seen as really positive signs of social development.
Positive. That seems counterintuitive.
Well, it shows the infant has formed strong, specific attachments to their primary caregivers. They can now tell the difference between familiar, trusted people and everyone else. That discrimination is social progress.
Okay, I get it. It means those primary bonds are really solidifying.
Exactly.
And that brings us squarely to attachment. We hear that word a lot. What does it actually mean in this context?
Attachment, in its core sense here, is that positive emotional bond that develops between a child and a particular person, usually a parent or primary caregiver. It's this bond that gives the child a feeling of safety and comfort.
You mentioned a secure base earlier.
Yes. As kids get a bit older and more mobile, they use that attachment figure as a secure base. They feel safe enough to explore the world, knowing they can return to that person for comfort and reassurance if needed.
Like a home base in a game of tag.
Kinda, yeah.
Yeah.
It fuels their confidence to explore. Now, the research mentions some key figures who really shaped our understanding of attachment.
Right, like Bowlby.
Yes, John Bowlby. He really emphasized that infants have this innate biological need for safety and security provided by a caregiver. Then there was Harry Harlow.
The monkey studies.
That's the one. His work, quite dramatically, showed the importance of contact comfort, that soft, warm touch and security. It turned out to be even more critical for the baby monkeys than just getting food.
Wow. Just being held and feeling secure.
Immensely important. And Konrad Lorenz, working with geese, showed how biological factors like imprinting during critical periods play a role in forming these early bonds.
So biology, comfort, safety, different angles on the same fundamental need.
Precisely. And building on all this, Mary Ainsworth developed a way to actually observe and measure these attachment patterns, the strange situation.
Okay, the strange situation. How does that work?
It's a standardized lab procedure. It involves a series of episodes where an infant, usually around 1 year old, is observed in a playroom with their caregiver. There are separations where the caregiver leaves and reunions when they return. Sometimes a stranger comes in, too.
And by watching how the baby reacts to all this.
Exactly. By observing their exploration, the reaction to the separation, and especially how they behave when the caregiver comes back, researchers identified 4 main attachment patterns.
4 patterns. Okay, can you walk us through them briefly?
Sure. First, they're securely attached. These infants use their mom, typically, as that secure base. They explore when she's there, get upset when she leaves, but are easily comforted and happy to see her when she returns.
That sounds like the ideal, maybe?
It's generally considered the most adaptive pattern in many cultures, yes. Then there's avoidant. These infants don't seem to seek much closeness with the caregiver. They often aren't very distressed when she leaves and might even ignore her when she comes back.
Okay.
Third is ambivalent, sometimes called resistant. These babies show a real mix of reactions. They might cling, but also resist contact, seem very anxious, and they're often hard to soothe even after the caregiver returns.
So, kind of conflicted.
Very much so. And finally, there's disorganized, disoriented. This is kind of a catch-all for infants who show inconsistent, contradictory behaviors. They might seem confused, fearful, or dazed. Sometimes they might freeze or show repetitive behaviors.
That one sounds the most concerning.
It often is associated with more problematic caregiving environments, yeah. But the secure pattern is the most common across cultures.
Okay, so that gives a clear picture. Now, what about moms versus dads? Does attachment work the same way? Early research focused a lot on mothers, right?
It did, yeah, partly reflecting the times, but newer research really underscores that fathers play a crucial and often unique role in attachment too. It's not just about who changes the diapers.
So what is it about then?
It's about sensitivity. Being attuned to the babies signals their cries, their coos, their gestures, responding appropriately, not too much, not too little, and engaging in that back and forth interaction, that communicative interactional synchrony we talked about, that dance of communication.
That makes sense. Being in sync. Does the research say if babies attach differently to moms and dads?
There's some evidence that, maybe when distressed, infants might initially prefer mom for soothing. This could be linked to different interaction styles. Sometimes dads engage in more physical, rousing play, while moms might do more verbal interaction or quieter cuddling, though these are broad generalizations, of course.
Right. Not hard and fast rules.
Definitely not. And it's super important to remember culture plays a big role here, too. How attachment looks, how it's expressed, even how we measure it can be influenced by cultural norms. What seems avoidant in one culture might be seen as promoting independence in another.
So context is key. Attachment isn't necessarily one size fits all globally.
Exactly. Think of it as a general human tendency, but with lots of cultural variation in its expression.
Okay. Now, babies obviously interact with more than just parents.
Yeah.
Siblings, other babies.
Absolutely. Infants can and do form multiple attachments, and these relationships evolve. There's this idea called the mutual regulation model, basically. Infants and parents learn together how to read and respond to each other's emotional states.
A two-way street.
Totally. And reciprocal socialization is similar. The baby's behavior actually prompts responses from others, which in turn shapes the baby's next behavior. It's this ongoing cycle. And even really young babies, they react positively to other infants. They'll look at them, maybe touch them, make noises. Basic social stuff starts early.
So peer interaction matters right from the start.
It seems so. Sociability generally ramps up with age. Imitation is huge here. Babies imitate each other, and they learn by watching slightly older, more expert babies.
Expert babies. I like that.
Well, And some researchers think this imitation capacity might be partly thanks to mirror neurons, these brain cells that might fire both when we do something and when we see someone else do it, though mirror neurons are still debated.
Interesting. It all points back to being wired for social connection.
Fundamentally, yes.
Now, we know every baby is unique. How do we talk about those individual differences? Personality, temperament, are they the same thing?
Good question. The research usually distinguishes them. Personality is seen as the broader collection of enduring traits that make someone who they are. Erik Erikson's psychosocial theory talks about stages like trust versus mistrust in the first year, learning if the world is reliable, and then autonomy versus shame and doubt, developing independence. These contribute to personality.
Okay, so personality is the big picture. What's temperament then?
Temperament is more about the how of behavior. It refers to those stable patterns of arousal and emotionality. Things like how active a baby is, how they react to new things, their general mood, their attention span, how regular their sleeping and eating patterns are, how intensely they react.
So it's more their behavioral style.
Exactly, their characteristic way of responding. Researchers look at dimensions like activity level, approach withdrawal, adaptability, mood quality, intensity of reaction, rhythmicity, things like that.
And where does temperament come from? Is it learned?
Yeah.
Innate?
The behavioral genetics perspective suggests a strong biological basis. Temperament seems to be largely inherited and is fairly stable over time, although it can be influenced by experience.
We often hear about categories like easy, difficult, and slow to warm babies. What do those mean?
Right, those are common classifications based on clusters of temperamental traits. Easy babies, maybe around 40%, tend to be adaptable, positive in mood, have regular routines. Difficult babies, maybe 10%, tend to be more negative, intense in their reactions, irregular, and slow to adapt.
Okay.
And slow to warm babies, about 15%, are often somewhat negative initially, withdraw from new things, have low activity levels, but they tend to warm up gradually with exposure. And then there's a chunk of babies who don't fit neatly into any one category.
It sounds really helpful for parents to understand their baby's temperament.
Hugely helpful. It leads to the idea of goodness of fit. This means development goes best when a child's temperament matches well with the demands and expectations of their environment, especially their parents' style.
So a high-energy kid might do better with parents who can provide lots of outlets for activity.
Exactly. Or a difficult baby might thrive with parents who are exceptionally patient, consistent, and warm. Goodness of fit can really buffer potential problems later on. And temperament might link to attachment. And even what's adaptive can depend on the culture.
Fascinating. No single best temperament, just different styles interacting with different environments.
That's a great way to put it.
Okay, let's touch on gender. How does that understanding start in infancy? And we should probably clarify gender versus sex first.
Right. Our source is clear.
Right.
Sex refers to biological characteristics, while gender is about the social perceptions, the sense of being male, female, both, or neither. It's socially constructed.
Got it. So how early do gender differences appear in babies?
Well, there's actually some disagreement on the extent and causes, but most agree that even from early on, boys and girls tend to experience slightly different worlds, partly due to how adults interact with them based on perceived gender. However, the actual behavioral differences between male and female infants are generally quite minor.
So the big differences we sometimes think about emerge later.
Largely, yes. As kids get older, gender roles become much clearer, heavily influenced by societal messages, toys, expectations, media, all of it.
But it's not all social learning.
Probably not entirely.
Yeah.
While society definitely amplifies things, some subtle differences in activity level or toy preference might appear early, suggesting it's likely a complex interplay between some biological predispositions and strong social shaping.
Okay, a mix of nature and nurture as usual.
Pretty much always, yeah.
Finally, let's look at the bigger picture. Family life today and childcare. Things have changed a lot, haven't they?
Dramatically. We see more single-parent families, smaller average family sizes, though teen birth rates are still relatively high in some places, and a really big shift. The majority of mothers with infants are now in the workforce.
That's huge.
It is. And we also have to acknowledge the economic reality. A significant percentage of kids, especially Black and Latinx children, live in low-income households. That means many infants are growing up in environments with substantial stressors.
And society is adapting, with more reliance on childcare.
Yes. Over 80% of infants in the U.S. get some kind of non-parental care in their first year. It's the norm now for many.
So the big question for parents is, how does this affect my baby?
And the overall message from the bulk of the research is actually pretty reassuring, provided the care is high quality. Most studies find only minor differences in development between kids in high-quality childcare and those cared for solely at home.
High quality being the key phrase there.
Absolutely critical. There can even be benefits to good childcare, like more social interaction opportunities, cognitive stimulation. Think about programs like Head Start, which show positive long-term effects.
Okay, so if childcare is necessary or chosen, focus on the quality. What does high quality look like for infants? What should parents look for?
Good question. The source suggests checking several things. Are there enough providers for the number of babies? Low ratios are important. Are the groups small? Is the center licensed and meeting safety standards? Are the caregivers warm, responsive, enthusiastic?
What else?
Look at the activities. Are they age appropriate? Is the space safe, clean, stimulating? Are the caregivers trained in child development? Does it feel like a positive, nurturing environment overall?
That's a really practical checklist.
Yes.
Super helpful. Okay, wow. We have covered so much ground: emotions, self-attachment, temperament, peers, gender, childcare.
It's a lot in those first couple years.
It really is. If you had to boil it down, what are maybe 2 or 3 key takeaways for our listeners from this deep dive?
Okay. I think first, just the incredible pace and complexity of it all. How much social, emotional learning happens so quickly, understanding feelings, developing a sense of self, even noticing social differences very early on.
Yeah, the speed is amazing.
Second, the absolute bedrock importance of secure attachment. That sensitive, responsive caregiving really does lay a foundation for feeling safe enough to explore and build future relationships.
Right, that secure base.
And third, maybe the point about childcare. That while quality is absolutely paramount, good quality care can be a positive experience, which is reassuring for many families today. It's about making informed choices.
Those are great points. It really drives home how foundational these early years are. Hopefully this has given everyone listening, parents, grandparents, anyone interested, some new insights and maybe a fresh lens for watching the infants in their lives.
Definitely. And perhaps it leaves us with a thought to chew on. Given how much social learning and awareness happens so incredibly early, even awareness of social categories, how can we as individuals and as a society be more intentional about fostering positive social understanding and empathy right from the very beginning?
That's a really powerful question to reflect on. Thank you for joining us on this deep dive into the social and personality development of infants. We hope you'll keep exploring this fascinating journey of human development.